Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show. Hi, I'm Paul, and I'll be your host this evening. Just pouring myself a quick beer to have while we chat about rugby this evening on the old Moa Brewery hazy IPA there. So, look, it's been a bit of a while, and I've been away for a few weeks, and this one will probably be a quick one. I think myself just thought I'd wrap things up with the end of the Super Rugby regular season, obviously heading into the quarter-finals, and with several teams obviously finishing up their seasons at this point. So we'll have a chat about that and a few of the news items that are bouncing around as well. And some stuff from the games at the weekend. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of coaching movement in Super Rugby. I think one of the Brumbies guys is heading off as well. So lots of that going to be going on for next season. Aaron Major has stood down at Moana Pacifica as well, who didn't get their or didn't get a win until the final game of the season, but at least they got one win for the season. Reading an article in Stuff around some of the stuff that some of the CEO of Moana Pacifica has said, and I'm going to say, for me, the results on the pitch haven't been great for Moana Pacifica and have been disappointing. We obviously would like them to win more games than that. But that kind of stuff, I think, was expected to happen, to be honest with you. Whereas fan numbers, that is, to me, where Moana Pacifica really has failed in so far. But surprise, surprise, perhaps this show will go on a bit longer because I have got the Mr. Stephen Harris dialing in. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, managed to track me down. Great to be here, Paul. Privilege and a pleasure. Been a while.
Hunted you down like a rabid dog, eh? It has been a while, yes, absolutely. But hey, being King's birthday's weekend and having the day off, perhaps that's what's given you the sort of spare time and the energy to join me. It's what has given me the energy, I guess. But also, the weather down here in Waihi has been abysmal. Lots of heavy rain. And I'll be honest with you, folks, I'm over it. I've had enough of the rain this year, and really gave me a kind of depressing start to the day. You saw a little video, Stephen, on my old Facebook there. But how was your weekend up in Auckland? Hopefully, it was a bit drier and a bit more fun than my one.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a week from not the greatest week, Paul, and I won't go into it. But there's been a couple of bereavements and a family medical event. So to be honest, just probably watching a little bit of rugby has just been a bit of light relief from it all. So it's just life as we sort of know it, and all we can really do is be there to support the ones that have passed on, Paul.
Absolutely, or the ones that are that are hurting and left behind. Those people we need to kind of really support. But yes, absolutely. Sorry to hear about that, Stephen. I hope things there's always sunshine after the rain, and the rainbows come, and that's what we do. We battle. We have to battle through, but make our way through it all. Remember, there are good times to come. Good evening to Simon and Nocturnal Rights who are joining us on the old YouTube. So look, I've ignored you for like a month, and it's great to have you still coming back to the show. Thank you guys for being there. So I was just going through some of the news items from the weekend, Stephen, chatting about Moana Pacifica and how their numbers have been pretty poor in the fan base. Listening to Sakilia, sorry, obviously I butchered the CEO's surname there. I'm sorry about that, but he's talking about their fan base being predominantly Pacific and from the south and west of Auckland. The COVID cost of living crisis really has hurt their audience, and that's part of the reason for their low crowd numbers. Whilst I get that, you look at the Warriors, who who kind of get their fan base from a similar demographic, I believe. They're packing out the stadium. I don't really think that can be the only excuse, really. And then when they say something along the lines of that more money comes from TV than it does from gate takings, it's like, yeah, you're kind of missing the point there that people want to watch games that have got good crowds, and those are the people that will be watching your away games. Yes, you're getting a good audience, or one of the higher audiences apparently, TV wise, but I think in-person audience is very important, Stephen.
Oh, hugely so. That whole promotional work, and yeah, listen, I did see the article on Stuff. CEO Pelenato Sakalia, obviously he's got a few thoughts of his own, and he seems to think there's some positives, and the team is building. There are shown, once again, you need success as a team, and this team has shown that they are quite capable of competing at times, but I think what it does show, they haven't quite got the depth at the moment, and I think it will basically take them a while to tap into that South Auckland base, and you're talking about clubs that are on the sort of fringe end or south end of Auckland, the Papatoetoes, East Tamakis, and of course the Manukau club, whom they use a few players for. But you're right, that promotional side is also big as well. I did wonder if they maybe should have taken one of the games up to a couple of unions that are maybe starved of Super Rugby, even if they actually took it down to counties Manukau or maybe up to Northland, who have a decent size Pacific Island base in their community. But as previously spoken on our own chat, as a friend of the show, Boa Thu mentioned, they do have a 3-year lease at Mount Smart Stadium, but just crowd-wise, just doesn't seem to be quite working. I must admit, the start that they got with was it last year with COVID probably didn't help them. Didn't help them, Paul. Didn't really give them the opportunity to get their feet on the ground. But yeah, a lot of work to be done in that space.
Absolutely. I think they need to get feet on the ground a lot more in schools, personally. But there you go. That's my opinion. I've talked about this a number of times over the years, that I think they should have basically they should provide free sports, a free sports education person who is in Moana kit in all the local schools, and talking to them about rugby. That to me is how I think you're going to get there in that one. But yeah, you say 3 years. Well, that means one more year on that lease, and then they'll be free to do whatever they like. But we'll have to see how they go about that. But look, the positives are this team exists. Okay, for a start, there's a whole bunch of players that are going to be playing at the Rugby World Cup for Tonga and Samoa, who have been able to be full-time professionals. So hence they'll be able to their strength and conditioning will be better. They'll be getting much better quality game time as well. And so with that being one of the raison d'etres of this team is to provide a pathway to those two international teams in particular, and also some of the other smaller Pacific nations as well. But those two in particular, it will be there. Now, are you just a pathway, or are you actually a team in a professional team yourself that's supposed to be able to run, create income, etc.? That's, I guess, a point of debate. But as to how successful they are from the financial point of view, but from a playing point of view, as in providing players, I think they are. There's definitely positives there. They do exist still, and it doesn't look like they're about to sort of collapse and disappear, like so many rugby startups that we've seen, for example, in the USA. Or even rugby teams in England that are collapsing at the moment, with I think the third one with London Irish looking like it might go. So from those point of views, look, there are positives. Are there positives in the results? Not particularly. Let's be honest. There's a lot more work that can be done there. But another thing we've talked about in our chat is when you compare them to Fiji and Drua. Look, the Fijian and Drua, the previous Drua perhaps were a different organisation, but there was a team in Fiji that had pathways to provide professional or semi-professional rugby that was there, that could be tapped into to produce the next team. There was already a fan base from that team as well that had been successful in the NRC, winning the NRC I think twice, but at least once. So they already had a fan base that had been started to be built up. They already had pathways of players, so they were much further along the path to becoming a Super Rugby, to becoming a team, or they had pieces of building blocks in place that they could use. Those are things that Moana Pacifica are needing to work on. Are they doing it quickly enough? Do they have the resources to do it? Those are other questions that, unless you're inside the organisation or have much better access than we do, you're not really going to know, to be honest. Levi Amua heading off to the Crusaders. Is this setting a bad precedent, or is this a one-off? What are your feelings on that one, Stephen?
Yeah, well, as we knew before this team was put together that Moana there were 20% that were going to be 20% of their playing roster were going to be available for New Zealand. I think they just opened up that.
No. Rephrase that. 80% have to be available for Pacific Islands. 20% can be available to anybody else. It doesn't have to be New Zealand.
Yeah, I was about to say that 20% is available for New Zealand, and they left that window open basically so Moana had the opportunity to recruit a Lincoln McClutchy or a Tavatava Nawai or indeed a Levi Amua. But Amua's form in a struggling team this year has been so good. And let's not forget he'd been part of the Crusaders before. He'd been part of the Crusaders at the Blues, so it's not as if he's turned up on a la Lincoln McClutchy. But I can probably see maybe another player like Timosi Tavatava Nawai, who's such a dangerous player, destructive player with ball in hand, on saying that he is Fijian. And you do wonder if the Fijian Drua may reach out to Tavatava Nawai, and boy, imagine what sort of carnage he would cause at a Rugby World Cup, if available for Fiji. I don't know what their contract stipulations are, but I think, Paul, this is just going to be, unfortunately, a little bit of a slow burn. And like you say, it comes back to marketing that particular Pacific Island area that is South Auckland, because there are some very, very good players running around. As you know, I cover the Auckland club scene, and the leading team at the moment is Manukau, and they seem to be a little bit of a hub or a feeder to Moana Pacifica at the moment, and you can see why they're leading the Auckland club competition at the moment. You've got a lot of guys that are training with Moana Pacifica. What their ceiling is going to eventually be, I don't really know, to be brutally honest. The other thing I suppose we've got to think about is Christian Liliafano and also the prop Sakopa Kepu were their original signings. Are those guys going to be around for a third season as well? Because they're going to have to replace probably their two most experienced heads at some time, Paul.
Absolutely. I mean, those two. I mean, unfortunately, Sakopa Kepu has been injured this season, but there's a lot of players in this team that haven't been in a professional environment before and need to learn that. Now, and one of the other points in the article on Stuff was that some players complained about not getting game time. Well, yes, perhaps some of those players weren't behaving or hadn't adapted to what being a full-time professional meant. It was interesting listening to on the Aotearoa Rugby podcast that Sky put together when they had interviewed Mick Bry, from obviously the head coach of the Fijian Drua, and how he talked about, again, the players in the Fijian Drua had. Again, haven't got the experience of being in a professional environment. Also, they haven't got the experience of playing, basically of doing more line-out mauls. They just don't do that style of play. Isn't there in their club game? Isn't something they do from the age of 15, whatever. So they arrive without the same base skill set in that area. Now, they have exceptionally good skill sets in counter-attacking and broken play rugby. Absolutely. So it's a swings and roundabouts thing. But he says, look, that part of the game is going to take several seasons to sort out for them because they don't have that background in there. Now, look, I forgot where I was going with this, but anyway, something on those sort of.
Listen, and if you turn it the other way, Paul, you look at all the players that come through the New Zealand system. Well, you could arguably say some of those kids that come into super teams have pretty much been professionals since they've been at school, because they're, usually a lot of them are at academies where they're living, breathing, doing the weight training. They're already basically looking after their bodies, diet, etc. And some of them, they come out of secondary schools, they're versed for New Zealand under-20s, and they go into NPC, straight into super. So, man, that's a lot of miles and a huge advantage that's under your belt that I think gets a little overlooked by a lot of people. And like I say, I come back to what I said. This is going to be a little bit of a slow burn, and it's also going to take a bit of convincing to get some real quality marquee players. And you need two squads, and that's been proven by the likes of the Chiefs and the Crusaders. The Crusaders, despite all the injuries, have got enough cover in their squad to do the job. But even they're starting to dig deep. But and we'll get to the Super Rugby results. Even the Chiefs showed they could still roll out a second. They could still roll out a second squad and still be relatively competitive and put some of the lesser Australian sides away.
Yep. Now, Dr. Rice says, Monaco will never be a threat. The best players are taken. Crusaders had every chance to sign him, Liga Amur, for years, but waited until Monaco played him. Yeah, sure. He gave him the platform to prove what he is. Now, Monaco won't be a threat if they keep only selecting from New Zealand, right? Which is where 95% of their current squad is from, or maybe it's 85% when you talk about Levi Moore and Scopy Kepu in there, but it's predominantly New Zealand-based players. If or when they get that feeder from Tonga and Samoa and get players from there, then they can become a threat, and then they can become competitive, because it's tapping a source of talent that isn't currently already being tapped. As much as French or European rugby has some academies in the islands, particularly in Fiji, essentially it's untapped at the moment, and hence with Miracle coming over and playing well, he'll be the figurehead or the center or the vanguard of those people coming through, and it's going to be a slow burn. It's going to take time for those players to come through, for those pathways to be built properly.
And boy, what a good player! And I would be more annoyed if one of the New Zealand franchises went after Miracle Falangi, to be honest, because he's a homegrown Pacific Island player who basically came out of the Sevens system. Now, man, he could be a shining light for kids back in the island that have got a lot of potential. So let's hope so.
Yeah, let's not put too much on his shoulders and let him actually play rugby as well. That's the other side of things. Just going to be a bit careful with him, and hopefully, and I'm sure Martin will be. Dr. Wright, will Whangarei ever get a Blues game? Get one Pacific up there for one? Well, look, Whangarei hosted the Women's Rugby World Cup. They have some fantastic facilities up there now. The Blues should be playing one game a season at least up there, not just a pre-season game, and it should be a real game up there. So Blues, again, it's one of their failings. I think they should get up there and do that. A bit of a sad note on the actually, before I move on to that next point, any other points about Whangarei and rugby?
Yeah, just to answer Nocturnal Rights, yeah, I totally agree. I don't know how well it'll go down with the Blues, because Northern are obviously considered part of the Blues franchises. But if you were taking Moana to any provincial venue, you'd actually take them to an area that's basically starved of any sort of Super Rugby. And it's not just Moana. I mean to say, imagine if you got the Highlanders up there, you'd actually you got the Highlanders, or or indeed that would be weird, having the Blues play up there. So I might park that up. But any other franchise,
just like I said, the Blues should play one game a year in Whangarei. The Highlanders should have to play one game a year in Invercargill. The Crusaders should play one game a year in Nelson. And obviously with Hurricanes, you're talking about Napier, maybe Palmerston North, one of those two, and alternate between those two. With the Chiefs, it's a bit more difficult because they've got Counties Manukau, you've got Taranaki and Bay of Plenty. Pardon me. Plus obviously. I've gone blank. Where's Hamilton? Hamilton's in.
Yep, Hamilton's in.
Waikato.
But
thank you. And now look, the Chiefs did take a game down to New Plymouth, but I think that would probably have to be rotated. And to be fair to Counties Manukau on their ground, I love the ground. I think it's true provincial. Unfortunately, it's too provincial, really, to host proper Super Rugby games. In all honesty, so I do think that that those are the Blues should take. Also, the Chiefs again. Taronga doesn't have a decent stadium, so it has to be either Rotorua or New Plymouth, and those two should get one each year, or alternate between the two of them. Sorry, so at least one game is outside of there. So to me, the Super Rugby teams should be taking their games around the other places to keep, because at the moment, keep the interest in the game, try spreading the word, etc. I'll turn around and said Highlanders did that with Palmerston North. Really? Wow. Okay, that should be a Hurricanes rather than Highlanders. I think the Highlanders took a pre-season game to Queenstown, and you see, and the Hurricanes do take a pre-season game to Ekatahuna. Because I've actually been to Ekatahuna for a game a few years ago now. Probably 2015, I think it was. So 2015 or 2016. So so as I Stephen, I took the overnight sleeper coach from Auckland down to Wellington, which had beds. So I slept on the top bunk there, which felt like being on a boat.
What do you pull a cord to stop the train as well, or
stop the coach? Stop the train. The coach.
It just stops at designated stops, does it?
Do that, and then unfortunately on the way back, the sleeper coach was out. So we had to come back in a normal coach that wasn't named as, wasn't branded up with the coach company. So obviously it was a cheap one they'd had to hire, and unfortunately when it went uphill, something was wrong with the fueling, because it would start juddering uphill. And would so the fuel wasn't going to the engine properly, and there's an awful lot of going up and down hills between Wellington and Auckland. I can tell you that was a long night.
Just an interesting stat too before we move on. And finally, now apparently Moana Pacifica has 48,000 followers on Instagram, and if you compared that with the Chiefs that has 234,000, or even the Highlanders that has 143,000. So it just shows you maybe the difference. And what you've got to also remember, there is probably a huge Pacific Island following that still follows the respective 5 New Zealand franchises.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Right. So that's let's move on from Moana Pacifica. Those sort of things. I don't think there are any other particularly new. Patrick Tuipulotu has fortunately broke his arm in that game, so he will be out for the playoffs, out for 6 weeks. So back in time for I guess the tail end of the Rugby Championship, and also into the Rugby World Cup if he is selected. But real shame for him breaking his arm at the weekend.
Yep. Big loss. He's been playing very well. He's hit a bit of a purple patch of form. I noticed he's been calling himself a heck of a lot more in the lineouts in recent times. They've got a little bit of cover there, and obviously Tom Robertson and also is it James Tucker as well that they can call on. But those guys are now going to have a pretty huge workload going into quarters and semis, should they progress that far. Shouldn't jump the gun, really.
I mean, should they dearie me, if they don't, then something's very, very wrong. But anyway, let's crack on with the weekend's games. Then I've got some stats up here, but first off, Blues against the Highlanders. Look, disappointing season clearly with where they're finished. And we'll look at the season-wide or season-long stats after this. So we'll probably dash through this relatively quickly. But look, not a great game. The Blues, if you look at the stats here, the Highlanders, 0 line breaks, missed 47 tackles. That's the second highest number of tackles missed in the entire season. Stephen, can you name the other team that missed 49 tackles?
I'd probably say it would be Moana, I would imagine.
Nope, it was the Crusaders in the opening game against the Chiefs. They missed 49 tackles. So, so the only team to have missed more than 47 tackles in a game is the Crusaders. The Crusaders had an absolute shocker in that opening game, let's be honest. But look, if you make 0 line breaks, Stephen, and you miss 49 tackles, you deserve to lose, and you deserve to lose by more than 16-9.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Listen, I got to give the Highlanders a little bit of credit because, I saw the stats at halftime, and like the Blues had 70%, and that was worth the possession and also field position as well. And credit to the Highlanders, they defended their backsides off, and obviously the Blues were nowhere near their best. Couldn't really, despite all that ball, couldn't put anything constructive together. And once again, they only try. Really, all came about through once again from that man again, Mark Tillier, individual try scoring, brilliant. So I think probably both sides would be really disappointed at the end of the day on saying that Blues did what they had to with regards to the Highlanders. There was some good. I thought there were some pretty useful performances defensively, but I just thought that a couple of calls in terms of replacements, like we all know Aaron Smith is a world-class halfback and he looked good, but I actually thought they needed to inject Fakatava a little bit earlier, and he did inject a little bit, but I thought that was too late, too late. And of course, Jerome Ainsley was having all sorts of issues with Nepo Lalala at scrum time, and I think he probably needed to be pulled a little bit earlier as well. I think they just gave the Blues just far too much field position, too much of the game played down in their half, and when the opportunity arose, it was a case of pull, too little, too late.
Yeah, look, and he, I agree. I think they should have pulled him because he was having an awful time at scrum time. Pull him in the first half. Look, the thing about props is you can bring them back if you need to, right? Unlike other players, once they're gone, they're gone. So I think you can bring him back. Substitute him early. Have a quick chat with him off so he doesn't lose his high confidence in himself. But to me, yeah, absolutely, he should have been. He should have been pulled much earlier on. Moving on then, another team that did what they needed to do. The Brumbies beat the Rebels 33-17. Unsurprising there, to be honest. Pretty much what I was expecting. I've not seen this game or seen highlights, I'll be honest with you. But as pretty typical from the Brumbies, look at that. 8 from 8 at the scrum time, 14 from 16 at the lineouts. Solid set piece. Very few turnovers with 12. Missed less tackles. And on that note, if you've got a solid set piece, you look after your ball, you're going to win most games, and that's what the Brumbies did.
Yeah, very, very much so. Listen, the Rebels started reasonably well. Their set piece was pretty solid, especially at scrum time, and they were causing the Brumbies a whole lot of errors. But listen, the yellow card to Reece Hodge around about the 33rd minute just opened up an opportunity which the Brumbies took. And listen, for the next 14 minutes of the second half, at 28-10, they pretty much had the game in the bag, and they just they pretty much finished it off with a try in the last minute just to stretch it out. End of the day, very comfortable win. I agree with what Nocturnal Rights has just mentioned. Carter Gordon is, I think he's a really good option for the Wallabies this year, not just with his attack, but defensively. He's one of the better first fives around. I'd certainly love to see the stats in and around that area, but like the way he holds the ball up, runs at the line, and you can only imagine how good he can be around better company. Yep.
So a couple of a bit of a rebuilding time for the Rebels. I mean, they've lost a bunch of players, I think. And they've had some decent games at home, but travelling has definitely been their Achilles heel. Another team that have been very good at home but struggled to travel are the Fijian Drua. Beat the Reds 41-17. Now this was I had a stat all lined up to already say to ask people was kind of which team, except for Moana Pacifica, hasn't scored a try bonus point, and it was going to be the Fijian Drua, but they got a try bonus point in their last game of the season, which is surprising considering how they have scored tries so frequently. But anyway, the big win there, 41-17. We saw that the TB had the Reds as favourites for this game, and we all just laughed and thought, "My God, easy money." Now I should put more than just my $2 on a multi for them, because look, that was at home. They were always going to run rampant, always going to beat the Reds. And again, another team with 0 line breaks in the Reds. You know the Fijian Drua at home are going to score tries. You've got to get your own line breaks too, haven't you, Stephen?
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Listen, that was just a celebration of rugby at the end. 17 all at half time, but you felt if the Drua were close, there was a good chance they could run over the Reds, and that's exactly what they did. And you go through the Reds lineup. Boy, that wasn't a bad sort of, okay, they probably knew they could probably lose and still make the finals, but boy, you look at their backline: Campbell, Dungunu, Vunivalu, Fluke, Paisami, O'Connor, McDermott. That's not a backline. And you go into the pack, they still had a quality pack on the paddock, but when you go up to the islands, you've got to be 100%, Paul, as a few teams have found out this year. And unfortunately for the Reds, they weren't in this game, especially the last 20 minutes.
I mean, I should have checked this, but I think the Blues are the only team that have gone to the island, got up there and won. Every other team that's gone there has lost. Now, not every team has gone. The Chiefs didn't go to Fiji, but still, that's a hell of a record by the Drua there. So well done to them.
Oh, very, very much so. And listen, there's also a couple of lessons in there, Paul, that if you go up to play the Drua, you've got to hang on to your ball. And as the Blues did in that particular game, they just ground them down in the forwards, because I don't think you could afford to play too much rugby, Paul. If you make mistakes out wide, I think the Drua, that sort of team, will just latch on to any loose ball that's going, and their off the cuff style is enough to break any team open. Onwards and upwards, and congrats for making the quarterfinals.
Simon here says there's plans to upgrade the grounds in Tauranga. Just to let you know, yes, I'm aware of that, but we're still some way away from that at the moment. We've seen how long it takes Christchurch to build a stadium, so I'm not holding my breath for Tauranga to build there, to be honest with you, because I'll be well dead before it gets anywhere near that. Vunivalu baffles me getting a contract extension. Interesting one. Injuries and he hasn't kind of struck the ground running as I think people expect, but we'll see how he goes in the future. I've brought up this slide, which is one we'll talk about later more so. But look, the Drua kicked the ball on average 14 times. That's nearly half what the Chiefs do. They like to hold on to the ball. So if you go up to Fiji and you don't hold on to your ball, or you're going to spend a lot of time tackling, because they're just going to keep running it back at you. You're never going to kick it back to you. You're not going to get it. So you're quite right there. Moving on then, Hurricanes versus the Crusaders. The Hurricanes, I'll be honest, this was one of the ones that destroyed. Actually, no, this was the first one that destroyed my multi, because I had it on the Crusaders. Look, as for the referee, the first time that Coles and Taylor were having a go at each other, I'd yellow carded both of them and got them off the pitch and told them to calm down. Coles, he's fantastic at it. I don't like it, but he's a fantastic grub. And congratulations to him. Well done. He did what he wanted. He achieved what he wanted to do, which was get Taylor yellow carded and himself not yellow carded. So well done. I don't like it, but there you go. And that proved to be, an important part of this game, Stephen.
Oh, very, very much so. Listen, 2 minutes going into halftime, your multi looked pretty safe. at 19-3, Paul. And to be honest, it just looked like slow strangulation that the Crusaders would just basically grind the Hurricanes down. But a couple of things also, 3 things actually happened. Just that try that Billy Proctor scored just on halftime, and it just kept them close enough. And of course, the next thing that happened was Sam Whitelock being replaced at halftime as well. He was pulled for the field, so you lose your leadership. And of course, the third thing, the yellow card to Cody Taylor, and unfortunately for the Crusaders, that was the catalyst that pretty much let the intruder back in the house. The intruder being the Hurricanes, and boy, credit to them, they took full advantage.
Yeah. Now there's I've gone blank as to what it's called now. So I'll just quick check. So I don't want to name check him. Dylan Clever from the Bounce, who has an email that goes out. Now he talks about how the worst or the least looking forward to quarterfinal is the Blues versus the Waratahs, as they're both backing into the quarterfinals. He said basically, they've gone downhill. I would be worried here if I were the Crusaders. I would be, or at least alarm bells, or red. There should be a red flag here for the Crusaders. They missed 32 tackles in this game. One of the things I mentioned about at the top was their stats during their opening game. Look, they lost 2 out of their 4 scrums. They missed 32 tackles. If we go back up to the very first game of the season, they lost. They only got 2 out of their 6 scrums, and they missed. 2 out of their 3 scrums. They missed that 49 tackles. Now it's not as red as it was against the Chiefs, but that's habits that they're not going to want to repeat. Now they've improved clearly, and you'll see that from the overall season stats. But they need to be wary of that, of missing tackles heading into probably not the quarterfinal against the Drua, but come semi-final time. That's something they're going to want to be. The race is going to be definitely all over them for, because that could be a worry for them.
Yeah, and I don't want to be picky, but once again, not for the first time, we've seen Scott Barrett exposed on that blind side as well, Paul. And I just wonder in that situation if you take a Scott Barrett into a World Cup in a similar situation, maybe you swap you put an open side to that short side, because that's an area where a lot of teams will expose. And once again, a template going into the quarters and semis for a lot of teams, or an area where other teams can look at. We also saw a nice little break from Cam Roigard down that blind side as well. We scooted away from the defence. Unfortunately, if he'd looked on the outside, he had a winger on the outside, decided to go for the kick. But listen, everything turned out good for Roigard and the Canes on the day.
Yeah, locked to right. So Barrett is a 6. He's not a 6. He's a very good lock. I agree, he's a lock as well. Now look, we've got other teams that are doing it. I mean, you've Peter Sefton-Toy for South Africa. You've got Courtney Laws for England. It does seem to be the current trend, but it's what they tried in the semi-final at 2019. It's and he doesn't seem to have learnt from that. I wouldn't be putting him at 6, to be honest with you. So Dr. Rice, shoehorning players exposes these problems. Absolutely. Again, also Topu Va'ai is also another player who's been who did that for the Chiefs early season. Again, I don't think he's done it enough to be someone I would want to do at international level either. So really hope that's not the answer for 6.
Yeah, to be fair, the Crusaders are missing a couple of loose forwards to injury at the moment, namely Callum Grace and Ethan Blackadder. And you would imagine, had they been available, one of those 2 players would have filled one of those particular gaps, Paul. And I'm not 100% sure if Barrett would have started in the 6 jersey, maybe an off the bench option.
No, I think he would have started in the row. He would have been next to Whitelock.
Whitelock in the middle row. So there you go. So that's the other thing. Anyway.
And moving on then, Tars versus Moana Pacifica. As we said, Moana Pacifica picks up their first win of the season. Well done to them. 24-33. That also my Multi had already been bust, but this one also busted as well. Well and truly. Well done to Moana, but one of the things that they've been able to do with particularly two players we've talked about earlier on, Levi Amua and also Toa Tabanawai, is those two players bust tackles. Missed tackles is one of the big things here. 36 missed tackles by the Waratahs. Yes, it's not as bad as the Highlanders, but still, that's a lot of missed tackles against the team. And if you miss that many, that leads to line breaks, which leads to scores. And well done to Moana Pacifica for finishing one off. Look, they only lost to the Ndrua by 1 point up in Suva. So they've been close before, but finally they got one, which I think is a decent send-off or something that I think Aaron Major deserved. I don't think he deserves to go away with a donut in his final season as the head coach, Stephen.
Yeah, listen, I think on Saturday night, I think they were probably able to feel close to their strongest. Obviously with Sakopa Kipu out, but I think that was probably close to their strongest lineup as well, Paul. So you can probably see the difference. They'll probably look back at the season and look at a couple of games that they probably should have won. You think back to that game against the Blues.
Yep.
You know, that was probably a game that got away with them. That was back in round 11. Didn't quite know how to close it out, if you know what I mean. So you know the potential is there. There were times that they were very competitive, but there also been times where they got exposed with their depth. I think one game that comes to mind, I think the Hurricanes game. Usually, you found with Moana, they were usually in games up until about, if not half time, up until about the 60th minute, before it was all undone with 20 minutes to go.
Yeah, also the Hurricanes came to this knowing that they'd lost by a golden point in season 1, so they weren't going to take this game lightly. Whereas a lot of other teams might underestimate or be a bit complacent against Moana Pacifica. The Hurricanes were not going to be. Waratahs lacking a tight five. You can probably see that in that in a good set piece there for Moana Pacifica. 8 from 9 at scrum time, 14 from 15 at line-out time as well. But actually, one thing we should probably look at, which we didn't talk about, is at the top there, Blues Highlanders. 22 scrums in a game? What the hell? Hold on to the ball. Jeez. Some poor handling there. You should not be having 22 scrums in a game, folks, at this level. Sure, if you're talking about Waihi Club Rugby, yes. In the Thames Valley, I expect to see a lot of scrums, a lot of knock-ons. I don't expect it, no matter what the weather at Super Rugby level. So that's just my little rant.
Yep. No, it was, to be fair, it was a very, very, very hard watch, and I think that area of lock has been an issue for the Waratahs for a long time. I thought they missed somebody like Jed Holloway in the second row, who gives them a lot of go forward on the carry, but it's a real worry. I'll tell you what, not the way for Michael Hooper, who I think is a fantastic player, and I think he probably deserved to go out in better style, but it won't be the last we see of him. Obviously, we'll see him in a Wallaby jersey during 2023.
Absolutely.
And in the semi-final, beg your pardon, probably and in the quarterfinal at Eden Park on Friday night, I think it is, Paul.
Yes, it is that one. Looking at then it's into the final game, Force versus the Chiefs. The Force had won all of their home games coming to this weekend, and so I put a cheeky couple of dollars on them, thinking that the Chiefs might take it lightly. But I think the Chiefs, after losing that game to the Reds in New Plymouth, that was a wake-up call. Look, a loss is never a good loss, okay? But it is never good. But as far as losses go, that was a good loss for the Chiefs because, they already came into this game having secured top of the table. It didn't matter. They could rest some players, but it meant all the other players went into this making sure that they were going to win it. A big defensive shift, having to make the most tackles out of anybody this weekend, did the Chiefs. So even though they won at 43-19, this wasn't a sort of make the Force camp in their 22 and attack them all the time. Look, I've not watched it, but 13 line breaks, oh my word. If your line breaks get into double figures, you're in trouble. Or the opposition is in trouble. The Force clearly defensively, 31 missed tackles, allowing 13 line breaks. And this Chiefs team is well coached. I've got a lot of time for Clayton McMillan, and I'm sure he will be involved in the All Black setup at some point in his future. Maybe he replaces Razor. Who knows? But anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah, quite interesting. You talk about the defensive shift from the Chiefs. I think you can basically put that down to the Force who play in a very narrow channel. Paul, they use their ball carriers. They don't always get the ball wide, and the problem for them is when they do turn ball over, usually the Chiefs will bite you from anywhere in a counter-attacking situation. And boy, it's not bad when you've still got Stevenson, Nanai Satoto, and Kebs Fabling at the back there. And that boy, they were still pretty handy through the middle. The interesting one was, for me, was Ramaka Poihipi playing at first five. Boy, looked pretty solid there, especially when you've got Rivers Rayhana on the bench who was returning from injury. So I thought Poihipi did a very commendable job stepping into that first five jersey with both Damien McKenzie and also Josh Ioane not available.
Yeah, and Gatland as well.
And Gatland, yeah. Ooh.
So a number of players there. So good result for the Chiefs. Unlucky for the Force, and that leads us to the final table of the year. So Chiefs, Crusaders, Blues, Brumbies are the top four, getting home quarterfinals. The Hurricanes make out that top five. There's a big gap between those and everyone else. The Waratahs sat in that sixth place, clear a game, or more than 5 points clear of the Fijian and Drua. So even though they lost to Moana Pacifica, that game didn't really matter as far as their standing in the table concerned, and they're kind of a clear best of the rest. The rest then, between the Fijian and Drua, Reds, Highlanders, Force and Rebels, they were all bouncing around and exchanging places during the season, with the and Drua and the Reds getting those final two quarterfinal positions. So for the four teams that didn't make the finals, the Highlanders, Force, Rebels, and Moana Pacifica. And before we go into some of these stats and pull out what makes a successful team or not a successful team, Stephen, let's just quickly go through those four teams that haven't made it to the finals and say, have they kind of, or how do you think their season has gone? I think for the Highlanders, you got to say this has been a very disappointing season not to make the playoffs. They would expect to have been in there, and they'll be not happy with how they've gone. And you knew at some point Stephen would have to forget to turn off his mute. It was going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, it was. Luckily, it happened with only about 12 minutes to go. Yes, hugely disappointing, because when you look through their personnel, they've actually still got a lot of the personnel that they had from last year. Yep, okay, they started the season with some injuries. I think just probably at the end of the day, just unusually for the Highlanders, just not having enough strike power. I thought there were a couple of times in some games where they actually stood up in the forwards, not always having Aaron Smith on deck. It probably was later in the season. Fakatava finally captured some form, but boy, just a real lack of X factor in this Highlanders team. And usually that's unusual for them. They're normally a heck of a lot better. Up in they're probably their two or three best performance. Ethan de Groot, Aaron Smith was consistently good for them throughout the season. I also thought Brazil, when he was asked to step into lock, I thought he went pretty well. Yeah, it's just hard to know. New coaching group as well. You can chuck that in the mix. Whether they'll be around next year, I don't really know. One thing that the Highlanders have got going for them, though, Paul, I think they've got a lot of young, talented guys that are not quite there, but they will be there. the years to come. There's a lot, they've got the lot, and I'm talking about guys like Sean Withy, Fabian Holland, players like that. And they have got a bit of a base, young Jack Taylor, I think he's in the New Zealand under-20s, the hooker, and Cam Miller, who's the first five. So they have got some good young players, but at the end of the day, you probably still need a couple of cagey old experienced guys. One of the guys that one of the leadership guys that they lost in recent times was Ash Dixon. Just seemed to get the best out of that team, and I think they had specific leaders in specific areas. But overall, Paul, they would be disappointed. They would have been very fortunate had they made the quarterfinals, Paul.
They would have been. Look, from a coach point of view, I don't think you can chuck a guy out after one season, but I do think, look, with only 4 line breaks, clearly attack needs to be worked on, and with 26, which is the fewest number of line breaks out of any team, with only 28. And with 28 missed tackles, the highest average per game out of any team, defence needs to be worked on. So the two, attack and defence, it's both sides of the ball. They need work. So definitely work from a coaching point of view. But I wouldn't necessarily change the head coach straight away. Next up, the Force. Look, they won all their home games except against the Chiefs. To me, a pass, but not happy, but not a failure of a season. For the Force, they conceded the fewest turnovers, so perhaps the best there, but the least disciplined with 12 penalties a game. So to me, look, and some similar thing happens to the Rebels. Decent at home, struggle away. Both those teams, for me, I would say had average seasons, not good, but also not bad.
Yeah. Look, listen, Force started the season well, Paul. They were 2-1. After round 3s, and then they pretty much hit the Highlanders. But that big loss, I think they had to. I think it was the Reds. They were well beaten by the Reds. Listen, I think that was a bit of a pointer that they could be pretty leaky at times. And when once again you look at their average missed tackling stats, that's high, and you are definitely not going to win games. But there were games that are a little unlucky. The game, I think, played down in Palmerston Wharf against the Hurricanes. They lost 45-42. Little bit unlucky that game, but I don't think ever they were ever capable of basically backing it up. Like, you look at the next round, they went and played the Waratahs, got well and truly humbled. But they were, their best win of the season, probably that win against the Highlanders, 30-17 at home was dare I say, pretty convincing for the Force.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Force, a bit like the Enduro, both stuck out all the way over there in West Australia. It's a long trip there. You lose a day's training to go and visit them. It does mean whenever they visit anyone else, they lose a day's training too. So hence, their home and away is going to be a big thing for them. And again, the playing up in Suva with the humidity and the heat. Again, the Fijian and Drua, they train in that, then have to travel to cold places like Canberra to play games. So again, those two teams are the two teams that got the biggest home advantage, but also the biggest travelling struggle. And one of we've talked a lot about already, they're going to be disappointed with their season, absolutely. Talk pre-season of them making the playoffs were optimistic, if I put it nicely. So yes, so I don't think there's much more we need to say about those guys. Stephen, looking at the rest of it then, look, the Chiefs, unsurprisingly, are the finished top of the table. They also have 4 green sections, so they scored the most average points a game. They kicked the most ball a game, so using that attacking kicking. They had the most line breaks per game, so you can't say, oh, look, they're a boring team. If you've got the most line breaks, clearly you're attacking with ball in hand, even though you kick it the most. And they missed the fewest tackles, so very good defence there. Something that is pretty similar to the Blues, in the fact that the Blues have also got a high number of line breaks and a high number of, or a very low number of missed tackles. Two teams that both attack well and also defend well, and unsurprisingly, they're in the top 3.
Yeah. Exactly. It all pretty adds up, and even if you look at the average sort of penalties conceded, actually they're all pretty consistent across the board. I've got to say, which has got to actually be a good thing. In terms of I would imagine that's the average tackle penalties given away, Paul, on the far side.
Absolutely, yes. So that's the average penalty given away. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast rather than looking at it, its range is 9 by the Brumbies. So the only team to be in single figures. The worst is 12 by the Waratahs and the fourth. So everyone else is 10, 11, or 12. It's not a big difference, as you say. It's a pretty. That stat doesn't alter or doesn't vary as much as you'd perhaps expect there with that one. So yeah, no big baddies and no goody two shoes either. Across the tournament.
Absolutely, it's going to be interesting for a lot of these sides, and obviously the season it's still got a few weeks to go, but it's going to be interesting for a lot of these teams who are basically going to lose personnel, and it's going to be, I think, once again you sort of point to your local competitions to sort of what talent is going to come through to make up these numbers. But just off the bat, I can see a team like the Fijian Drua only getting better moving forward, Paul, especially given what's happening in Europe with a few clubs that are struggling over there. We might actually see a few Pacific Island players head back towards New Zealand, and some New Zealand players as well. There are some returning as well, but I suppose that's going to be the interesting thing for me. But I suppose we have got some finals to look forward to.
We got some finals to look forward to. I mean, one other thing I would say about these stats as well, if you look at the Crusaders, they finished second, but they are very much average or just slightly over average on all their stats. None of their stats they're not best at anything, but they're also not particularly bad at anything. They're a just over average team from a stats point of view. Obviously, they've got some fantastic players and internationals in there, which mean that moments of magic can turn things. A couple of things. The Brumbies, expect the fewest offloads from them. They're up against the Hurricanes, who do make the most offloads. So it's a bit of a clash of styles there between the Hurricanes and Brumbies this coming weekend. And I'll be honest, out of all, there's 4 games obviously this weekend. We've got the Brumbies versus Hurricanes, the Blues versus the Waratahs, the Crusaders versus the Fijian and Drua, and the Chiefs versus the Reds. There's only one game worth watching, which is the Brumbies versus the Hurricanes. The other 3, if the Chiefs, Crusaders, and Blues don't win, then there's been a serious problem. Look, this tournament has had a top 5 and then everyone else. As I mentioned, the Waratahs do sit in the best of the rest, clearly better than everyone else. But those top 5 are way better than everyone else. And yeah, there's only one game this weekend that's worth watching, Stephen, and that's the last game of the round.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And if we were picking probably a top 4 at the beginning of the season, yeah, you probably would have gone for the 4 that you see there, with maybe the Hurricanes battling it out for that 5th position. Like I say, only real surprise is the Highlanders, for me, not making the top 8.
Wow, okay, I've been impressed by the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are closer to the top 4 than I expected, to be honest. They actually had a chance of finishing the top 4. I didn't think they would do. I actually thought the Brumbies would probably finish a place higher in 2nd or 3rd. But they slipped away, losing to the Force away and resting all those players was to me, well, look, you've got to rest players at some point, but that was a big missed opportunity for them. Other teams, obviously, the Highlanders I thought would do better. I'm impressed with the Fijian and Drua to be the kind of the next, sort of the best of the also ran teams. To put it, I guess, is not a very nice way of putting it, but the best of that kind of crowd to have finished there, I think is good for them in a second season. I think the Highlanders have been the disappointing team of the season, and to a lesser extent, the one Pacific Island. I expect them to get 2 or 3 wins, not just a solitary one, really, from the regular season.
Yeah, there was one.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say there was one particular game that I was really impressed with the Rebels. I'm just forgetting which which round it was. Might have been, good grief, might have been round 7 or 8, where the Crusaders actually played the Rebels, and the Rebels probably played their best 60-odd minutes of the season, but just the last 20-odd minutes they fell away. But there was a while there where I thought actually that game we might have actually seen a bit of an upset, but at the end of the day, the Crusaders were good enough to pull away in the end.
Yeah, when you're 43-27, just pull up the stats, but yeah, Rebels, perfect line out, decent scrum. Well, actually, they didn't get many scrums with the opportunity there, but they had to make a lot of tackles that weekend, and that's that in the end, I think, did them in. Just ran out of steam. But yeah.
One question that I did get, and I do wonder, I still do wonder if their talent is spread too far and wide, Paul. You kind of wonder if it was a little bit more suppressed and they had maybe 3 or 4 sides. At least each squad would have a little bit more depth, but I suppose that's another debate for another day.
It is, and also I think you'd end up with a. Are you a national sport when you only play on the East Coast? One just quick question from Simon: is there any truth to the article from Gregor Paul from the New Zealand Herald about Australia pulling out of the Super Rugby Pacific? Well, first off, I don't subscribe to the New Zealand Herald because I don't think it's worth it, put bluntly. Gregor Paul is very good at producing articles that make you click. Let's be blunt. Is there any truth to it? There is probably some truth to the fact that they're threatening it, and they've done so before. Now, the fact that they've had their CEO leave and trying to replace him means I think it would be a difficult time for them to pull out and suddenly and put something else in place when you haven't got a leader for your organisation. And then also with the Rugby World Cup coming up, it's an awful lot on Rugby Australia's plate to be pulling out of Super Rugby Pacific at this time. I think timing would be difficult for them. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's posturing. I think it's something that they'll threaten to get a better deal, and I think they deserve a better deal, put bluntly, on sharing of TV rights, so that hence they can spend on that 5th team that Stephen thinks might not be they might have the talent for. Is there any truth to it? There's probably truth to the threat of it, but I don't think they would actually go through with it. I think that calm heads would prevail in the end, and New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia would realise they need each other. Your thoughts any different? Do you agree with that, Stephen, or do you disagree?
Yeah, no, I certainly do. Mate, I can't disagree with anything that you said, Paul. Just before we go, I just want to quickly mention the New Zealand under 20 team, which took out the second test against Australia, winning 19 points to 18. Was a good comeback from the Australians, but boy, this New Zealand team who head away to the World Cup in South Africa, which I think starts the 24th of June, they will have to work a lot harder on their set piece. It's fair to say it was an asset of both tests where the Australians completely dominated the New Zealanders, and we all know the Northern Hemisphere teams, well, they love the scrum, as do South Africa. New Zealand in their particular group, I think first up they play Wales. Now they should beat Wales. Wales, I think, may have finished in last place in the Six Nations under 20. I stand to be corrected, either them or Ireland. They should get past them, but the next game they play France in their second game, and that could be quite a defining game, because to make the semi-finals you've got to win all 3 games, Paul, to progress to the semi-finals. Their final game is against Japan, but boy, they got very little time to sort out their set piece. Good though, on the other side, I'd be remiss of me not to congratulate the Australian under-20s. Boy, they've got some good young players coming through, and I think they have had some decent under-20 players coming through in the last couple of seasons. Good to see. Yeah,
look, France, Wales, New Zealand, Japan in that pool A. Ouch, that's That's going to be a tough one. That's particularly that game against France on the 8th of March, the second game up. That is going to be a biggie. The Pool B, just so you know, Australia, England, Ireland, Fiji. Ooh, that's pretty tasty. Pool C, South Africa, Argentina, Italy, and Georgia. There we go. Those are the three pools, with the bottom team dropping out and gets replaced. So interesting to see that the 2023 World Rugby Under 20 Championship, it's not called the Junior Rugby World Cup, that's what it's called, is going to be held in South Africa both in 2023 and in 2024. A bit of a surprise to see that it's going to be in the same place 2 years running, but maybe that's around who's willing to pay for it to make it happen at the end of the day. And from a development point of view of players, heading overseas to play in a tournament like that can only be good for their development. So I'm playing on South African pitches. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing from that point of view. Stephen, thank you so much for being with me this evening. It's been great to talk to you yet again about rugby. Thank you, everyone who has joined us in the live chat. I don't know if I'll be back next Monday or not, but we will see. We'll try, obviously, to do this every Monday, but I've failed over the last 3 Mondays. So no promises, but especially with only one decent game of rugby this weekend, from at least looking at it. But we'll see. Everyone, stay safe, particularly if you're out here in the Coromandel area with all this wet weather. Please stay inside and try not to travel too much, because I'm sure the roads are going to be a bit dodgy. Stay safe, folks, and have a good week. Thank you again, Stephen.
No problems.